We are in part 5 of chapter 4, The Rape of the Mind. The surrender of the mind to its new master does not take place immediately under the impact of duress and exhaustion. The inquisitor knows that in the period of temporary relaxation of pressure, during which the victim will rehearse and repeat the torture experience to himself, the final surrender is prepared. During that tension of rumination and anticipation, the deeply hidden wish to give in grows. The action of continual repetition of stupid questions, reiterated for days and days, exhausts the mind till it gives the answers the inquisitor wants to have. The addition to the weapon of mental exhaustion he plays on the physical exhaustion of the senses. He may use penetrating, excruciating noises or a constant, strong flashlight that blinds the eyes. The need to close the eyes or to get away from the noises confuses the mental orientation of the victim. He loses his balance and feelings of self-confidence. He yearns for sleep and can do nothing else but surrender. The infantile desire to become part of the threatening giant machine, to become one with the forces that are so much stronger than the prisoner, has won. It is unequivocal to surrender. Do with me what you want. From now on, I am you. That only deprivation from sleep is able to produce various abnormal reactions of the mind was confirmed by Tyler in an experiment with 350 male volunteers. He deprived them of sleep for 102 hours. 44 men dropped out almost at once because they felt too anxious and irritated. After 40 hours without sleep, 70% of all subjects had already had illusions, delusions, hallucinations, and similar experiences. Those who had true hallucinations were dropped from the experiment. After the second night, sporadic disturbances of thinking were common to all subjects. The participants were embarrassed when they were informed later of their behavior. The changes in emotional response had been almost noticeable. Euphoria followed by depression, dejection, and restlessness. Indifference to unusual behavior shown by other suspects. The experiment gave the impression that prolonged wakefulness causes some toxic substance to affect brain and mind. Only the few strong, independent, and self-sufficient personalities who have conquered their dependency needs can stand such pressure or are willing to die under it. The ritual of self-accusation and breast-beating and unconditional surrender to the rules of the elders is part of age-old religious rites. It was based on a more or less unconscious belief in a supreme and omnipotent power. This power may be the monolithic party state or a mysterious deity. It follows the old inner device of credo quia absurdum, I believe because it is absurd, of faithful submission to a super world stronger than the reality which confronts our senses. Why the totalitarian and orthodox dogmatic ideology sticks to such a rigid attitude with prohibition of investigation of basic premises is a complicated psychological question. Somewhere the reason is related to the fear of change, the fear of the risk of change of habits, the fear of freedom, which may be psychologically related to the fear of the finality of death. The denial of human freedom and equality lifts the authoritarian man beyond his mortal fellows. His temporary power and omnipotence give him the illusion of eternity. In his totalitarianism, he denies death and ephemeral existence and borrows power from the future. He has to invent and formulate a final truth and protective dogma to justify his battle against mortality and temporariness. From then on, the new fundamental certainty must be hammered into the minds of adepts and slaves. What happens inside the human psyche under under severe circumstances of mental and physical attack is clarified for us by Anna Freud in her book on the general mental defenses available to man. Earlier, I myself tried in several publications to analyze the various ways people defend themselves against fear and pressure. In the last phases of brainwashing and menticide, the self-humiliating submission of the victim serves as an inner defense device, annihilating the prosecuting inquisitor in a magic way. The more they accuse themselves, the less logical reason there is for his existence. Giving in and being even more cruel toward oneself makes the inquisitor and judge, as it were, impotent, and shows the futility of the accusing regime. I'm going to read that one more time because I think that was a really important sentence. Giving in and being even more cruel toward oneself makes the inquisitor and judge, as it were, impotent, and shows the futility of the accusing regime. We may say that brainwashing and menticide provoke the same inner defensive mechanisms that we observe in melancholic patients. Through their mental self-beatings, they try to get rid of fear and to avoid a more deeply seated guilt. They punish themselves in advance in order to overcome the idea of final punishment for some hidden, unknown, and worse crime. The victim of menticide conquers his tormentor by becoming even more cruel toward himself than the inquisitor. In this passive way, he annihilates his enemy. The mysterious masochistic pact. In Arthur Koestler's masterpiece, Darkness at Noon, he describes all the subtle intricacies, reasonings, and dialectics between the inquisitor and his victim. The old Bolshevik, Rubashov, preconditioned by his former party adherents, confesses to plotting against the party and the party line. He is partly motivated by the wish to render a last service. His confession is a final sacrifice to the party. I would explain the confession rather as a part of that mysterious masochistic pact between the inquisitor and his victim, which we encounter too in other processes of brainwashing. It is the last gift and trick the tortured gives to his torturer. It is as if he were to call out, "Be good to me, I confess, I submit, be good to me and love me." After having suffered all manner of brutality, hypnotism, despair, and panic, there is a final quest for human companionship, but it is ambivalent, mixed with deep despising, hatred, and bitterness. Tortured and torturer gradually form a peculiar community in which the one influences the other, just as the therapeutic sessions where the patient identifies with the psychiatrist, the daily sessions of interrogation and conversation create an unconscious transfer of feelings in which the prisoner identifies with his inquisitors, and his inquisitors with him. The prisoner encaptured in a strange, harsh, and unfamiliar world identifies much more with the enemy than does the enemy with him. Unwittingly, he may take over all the enemy's norms, evaluations, and attitudes towards life. Such passive surrender to the enemy's ideology is determined by unconscious processes. The danger of communion of this kind is that at the end all moral evaluations disappear. We saw it happen in Germany. The very victims of Nazism came to accept the idea of concentration camps. And we'll call that the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one. We are in Chapter 4, The Rape of the Mind. See you in the next video. Stay with me.